Hi everybody, it's Susan again. I've come back to life actually because I was quite ill this week. You might still hear it in my voice. I thought I'd save you from a very snotty nose voice and try to wait until I felt better to make this video. So here I am, about a week late, actually, a little more than a week late to talk about Venus retrograde. And I also want to mention the Chiron retrograde, which is interesting because it's happening as of the same day that Venus went retrograde, just a couple of hours later. What do we want to say? First, I'm going to talk about Venus retrograde in general and Chiron retrograde as well. And then we'll go sign by sign because it's quite an interesting time to go back and reflect on different things that we need to re-examine. I don't actually subscribe to this idea that retrogrades are slowing down, like a period of everything kind of grinding to a halt or slowing down. It doesn't work like that. And especially because roughly half of this year, most of the planets are retrograde, and that's not abnormal. It's quite normal that planets systematically go retrograde in similar cycles. You know, Chiron goes retrograde 5 months of the year, just like many of the outer planets. It's really quite typical. So it's a much less obvious effect, let's say. Certainly wouldn't have a particularly slowing down effect on our day-to-day lives. You might be able to say that when we talk about something like a Venus or a Mercury retrograde. But even then, I don't really notice that things actually slow down. I think what it is that we tend to have to go over things that were already covered by the movement of the planet up until the point that it goes retrograde. So, and also, by the way, speaking of retrograde, we're going to have Mercury retrograding in Virgo, where it is at the moment that I'm filming this, but I'm actually using the retrograde chart, the Venus retrograde chart, because it tells us a little bit about the quality of this period of time. So I'm actually recording this on the 31st of July. When an inner planet, like what we call the personal planets, go retrograde, it will have an impact on our lives, and most especially for those who are ruled by that planet. And so in the case of Venus, that would be Taurus and Libra, or those who have the planet in their sign. In this case, it's Leo. And or if there's a planet that's important in your chart, or a placement, meaning the ascendant or the midheaven or the descendant or the IC, for example, or the nodes. So any of those aspects of our chart that are affected directly by the planet will be, it'll have a stronger impact on us. And often these kinds of things can go by and many people will not notice at all. And I also, just on that topic of noticing, I also want to mention that, you know, astrology works best when we are using it as a tool and not by over reliance on it. There is, you know, in our psychology, in our fragile human minds, we have a very strong tendency towards being influenced by a thought. And so we can very quickly latch onto a thought and we start to see things that we're looking for. And this is called a confirmation bias. And so astrology definitely has suffered from confirmation bias. And especially nowadays, where there's so much astrology spread around all kinds of media, print media, and especially here on YouTube and other social media. And so we're really bombarded with notions of astrology in a way that we never were before. And that can be good and bad. And so just bear in mind that life goes on. There was a time when you didn't know any of these things and you were perfectly happy to get on with your life. And so don't let these things rule you. You know, don't let yourself get carried away with what's going on in the sky. I think astrology, obviously, as an astrologer, I think it's a fantastic tool and it should be used in that way. So you shouldn't be over referring to transits. But I do like to highlight things that I think are going to be useful to our personal development, because that's what I'm aiming to help people with. I don't sensationalize things because I don't think that's helpful. I don't care how many views I get for my videos, because I figure if you're here, it's because you need me to tell you something. You've decided unconsciously or consciously that I can share some interesting information with you and you want to hear it. So I don't need a million of you to be watching me. I just need those of you who want to receive the message to be here. So you won't hear me beefing up minor aspects or Mercury retrograde or any of these things that are so banal and happen so often that it's almost comical that it should be even worthy of remarking. So after that little rant, let's get back to Venus retrograde. I want to just point out some of the facts and details that are interesting for us to understand about this. So Venus goes retrograde about every 19 months. So that's a standard. She's one of the planets that goes retrograde the least, in fact, and that is what makes this actually quite special, having just said that we shouldn't pay attention to these things too much, but with Venus it actually is really interesting. And so that's of course just over about a year and a half. So 19 months ago we had a Venus retrograde in Capricorn in January of 2022, and so you can reflect back on that time and see what January 2022 was bringing you, or was turning up for you in the sign of Capricorn. Now, of course, at that time, Venus was co-present with not only the Sun in Capricorn, but also with Pluto. And so with Venus going retrograde, she will always be with the Sun. That's not exceptional. But in the case of Pluto, that is really exceptional. And that only happens every 8 years. And that, of course, will be the last time that we have Venus retrograding with Pluto. And so that's quite interesting in and of itself in terms of that Capricorn cycle. And so the last time that Venus was retrograde in Leo was 2015. And same period of time, because of course Leo is the summer sun, and so basically late July and August of 2015. And if you go back another 8 years, then we're looking at 2007, summer of 2007, July, August, Venus was retrograde. And if you go back again, it was 1999 and then 1991 and so on. And so this period of Venus retrograde in Leo can bring up a really interesting theme for you. And that can be with regards to all of the Leo issues, which is love and your self-confidence and your sense of self-expression, leadership as well, or that again depends kind of on the house. We'll be seeing that sign by sign as things are coming up sign by sign. But it's going to bring out those questions, or these, a referral of something that may have already happened in the intervening weeks since Venus has been in Leo. So she entered into Leo on the 5th of June, and she began that shadow phase by the end of June. And so where Venus is stationing retrograde, or did on the 23rd, was 28 degrees and 36 minutes. You can see that here at the bottom of the chart. And Venus will go all the way back until let me just change the chart, because then you can see the actual stationing retrograde, the station direct chart. She's going to go all the way back to 12 minutes of, so 12 degrees and 12 minutes of Leo. And that period that she's covering brings us back to the end of June. And so there's something here that you can also reflect on, basically the last, it would be the middle of June. So it's the 5 weeks before her retrograde. And so we're looking over not only what has happened, but things that may have come up and might require a little re-examination. Often, of course, because it's Venus, it's going to involve love and money of all descriptions. So love, of course, meaning intimate relationships, especially in Leo, but also just our friendships and relationships of all kinds. Life functions on the basis of relationships. Even if we don't know each other, we're having a relationship of some kind. Even if we'll never meet physically, there's some kind of participation. Me here and you in the comment section or whatever, which I always enjoy reading, by the way. And so relationship is just really important. So that is why Venus is so important to us. So as we're in this, let's come back now to the chart that we just saw, which is our Venus retrograde. This is where she's stationed, retrograde. So it's, again, I'm a bit late. This is already kind of a week later now, but I think the chart itself is very interesting, and I'll tell you why in a moment. But just before I say that, I want to just say that before Venus stations again, which is the chart you just saw, she's going to be spending about 16 days, a little bit over 2 weeks, in the nighttime sky. And then she spends about 1 week with the sun. That is what we call under the beams, or combust, meaning that we really don't see her. She disappears. And then she comes back for about 16 days. She starts to appear in the morning sky, and she becomes the morning star. So this is what happens when Venus retrograde. So any planet that is retrograding will have a relationship with the sun. That's how that happens. There is a kind of a moving into the beams of the sun and then a moving away from the beams of the sun. And so this is, except for the very far outer planets, they don't have this same. So the inner planets, the personal planets, have this relationship with the sun. And so this particular year, it's a total of 42 days. And so you often hear that Venus is a 40-day cycle. And that's kind of true. So it's not always true. So it depends on the actual year. It depends on the cycle. So this time around, it's a little bit more than 42 days. And each time that Venus retrogrades, it's going to be around 40 days, but it's not actually. So again, it's one of those things that's like close, but not entirely. So always better to either hold these sort of catchy phrases lightly and not take them as gospel, or do more research. Just literally get a calendar, count the days and see, is it really 40 days? And in this case, 42 and a bit. So just to point out that, again, there's a lot that's being said about things like this that are not specifically true. They're almost true, but it starts to, in my opinion, dilute astrology when we start to allow details like this to slip, because they do actually matter, or at least they do to me. So I'm hoping that I can convince you that they actually matter. So the evening star stage, which is where we are still now, and up until Venus is fully combust with the sun on the 13th of August, I'm going to consider this the evening star stage. Is when we're really reflecting on what has already come before. Now you can reflect back on these last few weeks since Venus was in Leo in the early part of June, or you can reflect on the last cycle, meaning about 19 months ago, when so since January of 2022, when Venus was last retrograde in Capricorn, or you can go back to 2015, for example, and all of the previous cycles of Venus in Leo. So there's lots of different layers of ways that you can reflect on what's been going on in your life. Keep in mind that in January 2022, Venus was not only retrograding in Capricorn, but also the nodes were shifting. And so the nodes moved in, the North Node would have moved into Taurus just in the middle of January 2022. So that was quite a big shift, because also Venus, remember, rules Taurus, and she would have just been in Capricorn, which was a trine. So it could have been quite an interesting time and worth reflecting on. Get your agendas out and see, get your phone out and see what you were doing. Check Instagram for the photos, the evidence that you were alive in January 2022. So then if we go to the cycle after the 13th of August, so that means that once Venus has moved, now slowly moving out of the beams of the sun, which, as I said, takes about a week. So there is this exact conjunction, 13th of August, but days before and days after, she is under the beams or combust. And so you take that point to look forward. I think this is the best way of using the retrograde cycle, where you start to then plan. So you've had a sense, okay, this is what was going on. And now we have the sense of, okay, this is what needs to happen, or this is what I understood, and this is what I would like to change. And this will be with regards to relationship, and keeping in mind that you are 50% of any relationship that you're in. And so it's not always about the other. Sometimes our most important progress in relationship is to understand our contribution to it, for good or bad. And so go forward in plans, commitments, and so on. Don't have the sense that a retrograde is not a good time to start anything. Life goes on, and we do have to, engage in things of all kinds. When Venus is retrograde, it can be very helpful to avoid, especially when Mercury goes retrograde at the end of August. So basically through August and towards the end of August is when Mercury retrogrades, but throughout August, Mercury is already in its shadow, in the retrograde shadow. So if you have any opportunity to postpone any kind of contract, then do that, because you'll probably have better information in September. But like I said, life goes on, and don't hold yourself back. I also don't subscribe to this idea that you shouldn't have, I don't know, like a haircut or cosmetic changes or whatever. I think it's not really a problem unless there's something in your chart that suggests that there's already, some kind of complication around that. That would depend on your own natal placements. But again, don't take these things terribly literally. That's a very sort of mechanistic way of using astrology. It's not really and paradoxically, I find that the people that say that kind of thing are also telling you that you're a co-creator. So I don't get that at all. They're all telling you that you have freedom of choice, but then they say don't get your haircut or something when Venus is retrograde. So think for yourself, I think, again, is the bottom line. Do what you need to do to get on with your life, but reflect and especially learn. Keeping in mind, Venus is, of course, about harmony, but very especially since the South Node is now in the sign of Leo in Libra, Venus ruled Libra. We want to also bear in mind that sometimes over compromising towards, the goal of harmony at all costs is not helpful. So just keep these thoughts in your mind as you're going through the next few weeks. With Chiron, Chiron went retrograde just hours after Venus, about 12 hours, maybe even 11 hours after Venus. And in fact, Chiron went retrograde at this degree, which is why I'm not making a separate chart for Chiron. So Chiron is at this degree already of its station, retrograde, 19 degrees and 57 arc minutes of a degree of Aries. And Chiron, as I said, is retrograde almost half the year. It's like 5 months of the year. And so this is something that will be more in the background. It's not something that you're going to notice terribly strongly. But I think it's really interesting nonetheless to keep track of that, because Chiron is in Aries at the moment, and especially if it's going to be affecting degrees that are close to your planetary degrees. So let's give it we'll say a 2 to 3 degree orb. I'll give it 3. So let's imagine Chiron is at 20 degrees, because it's almost at 20 degrees. So if you've got anything from 17 to 23 degrees of Aries, or any of the cardinal signs, that means Cancer and Libra and Capricorn as well, then this will be affecting you more powerfully. And then by sextile or trine, then in the air or fire signs, same degrees. And so the air signs being Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, and then the fire signs being, of course, Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. So anything between 17 and 23 degrees. I'm not sure if I mentioned for Venus the degrees, but let me just quickly mention that now in case I didn't, because now I don't remember that I said it. So Venus stationed retrograde at 2836 of Leo. She'll go all the way back to 1212, and we're going to give that a 3-degree orb on either side as well. Again, the tighter the orb, the more relevant it is. So you could even squeeze it down to 2 degrees. But let's just say, at the very least, within the 1st or 2nd degree of Virgo, and all the way back to about, say, 10 degrees, 9 maybe of Leo. That's what we're looking at here. And if you have any planets in that part of your chart, in the Leo sign especially, or in Aquarius, or all the fixed signs, so Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, and Scorpio, that will affect you the most. And of course, for the Leos most especially. And then, of course, for the fire signs again. So that's Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius. And the air signs will have more benefit. Fire and air will benefit much more from these fiery retrogrades. And so that is the Gemini and Libra and Aquarius again. So Aquarius is getting sorry, I'm confusing now. Sorry, I'm mixing it up. I want to say Libra and Gemini, and then as a trine, we're looking at the fire signs, so Aries and Sagittarius. So I think my cold has completely messed up my brain, and I'm just not thinking clearly. So if that was confusing to you, just listen to your sign. I'll make it all clear then. And I apologize because I did mess it up there. Let me just double check a second before I move on, because I just wanted to be sure I wrote down all kinds of my little notes here, trying to make sure that I didn't forget anything for you. So Chiron, in terms of the retrograde of Chiron, we're covering territory that Chiron had already passed since the beginning of April. And so here with Chiron, we're looking at issues that may have come up since April. And especially in Aries, Chiron in Aries for me represents very much issues around self-love and self-esteem. And this is why I think it's quite relevant to that Venus rather in Leo retrograde, because that Chiron in Aries is a lot about to what extent am I my own worst enemy? It's that Chiron energy of self-sabotage, which I see quite often. And I do find that's one of the strongest signatures of Chiron. Often it is something that's to do with our childhood and our early upbringing, because the messages that we got and the way that we were, taught, or the way that we were told who we are, kind of sticks. It sticks with us unconsciously, and sometimes very difficult to shed. At times people are so deeply wounded, and depending on how Chiron is in your natal chart, that becomes very, very difficult. And especially for those of you who have Chiron in Aries, that would be anyone born in the, I think that's around 70 till 77 or something like that. I have to double check that, but if you're having your Chiron return now, you've got Chiron in Aries. That means that you're somewhere between the ages of, let's say 45, and no, not 45. You're somewhere in the neighborhood of 50, around there, 47 to 57, probably something like that, or 56. Something like that, because Chiron, I think maybe it was from 69 till 77 that Chiron was in Aries. So again, I'm sorry I didn't prepare that, but I think it's worth just knowing that if you're having your Chiron return, this will impact you even more, because it's especially for those of you who are around the age of 50 right now, 49, 50, 51. This will be about the degrees that your Chiron is. And so you might be finding that you're confronted with things that you just seem to find difficult to shake off, or they're patterns that you realize are coming back and they're undermining you. And that can be undermining your self-confidence or your physical health or your self-esteem. And as Chiron is really about these childhood wounds, or these this fragile sense of self, especially in Aries, it's of course going to have an impact on how we relate to other people and also how we act in the world. So I will talk about that specifically in the houses when I go from sign to sign. And then we'll see how that shapes up for everybody. And then another thing I wanted to point out was what this chart is quite amazing, actually, for this Venus stationing retrograde, because not only, of course, did we have the Venus there, she's close to Mercury, but it's not as close as I would get excited about. She's, 7+ degrees away. But that's still a conjunction. Mercury becomes important because he's the ruler of Mars and the moon at this time. And the moon is very interesting because it's exactly opposite, just within a few minutes of a degree opposite Neptune. And then we've got Mars opposite Saturn as well. So it was just after the exact opposition of Saturn. So we have this moon opposite Neptune, which is very much about not being sure about our emotions, not being clear in terms of how we're thinking about things, how we're maybe assessing things, which is, of course, extremely important when it comes to relationships. And then, of course, we've got Mars opposing Saturn, which is actually quite confrontational. And so around the time of this station, and I'm going to give it a couple of days because stations don't just kind of happen like that. It tends to grind to a slow standstill or apparent standstill over some days. So we're going to say from basically Friday the 21st until the Tuesday the 25th, this Venus energy was very, very strong. And so anything that was happening in those days, so say from Friday through the Tuesday, would be quite significant to reflect upon, because that will be, I think, what is an ongoing topic for you for the next few weeks, which will probably only really feel some kind of resolution once Venus comes back, or let's call it a comfortable or an easier resolution when Venus comes back to this point, which will be about the 6th of October, when Venus is back at that 28-36 degree point, and therefore out of that retrograde shadow, which is almost the entirety of her time in Leo, because she leaves Leo on the 8th. And so have a look at what was going on in those few days around this period of time, because I think it could be quite instructive in terms of any confusion, that Neptunian opposition to the moon that might have had you feeling either confused, or it could also have had you feeling very fragile, emotionally fragile. And, best case scenario, it was romantic, and Mars Saturn could have been something that was more vibrant, passionate. Why not? That would be nice. Pluto was also trining this moon. So Pluto is in this very, very long sextile, ongoing, coming and going sextile to Neptune. That's a signature of our era. But the Pluto trining the moon was also significant, because that also suggests that the emotions were very deep and very powerful at the time. And so again, these are worthy of contemplation. What was coming up from a deeper unconscious place, perhaps around fears, Pluto moon, and perhaps around things that we needed to reflect upon. And then, of course, wouldn't it happen to be also an almost exact opposition to the sun? So this was, again, just a day after the Pluto opposite the sun. And so that's intense, because that's your sun representing consciousness. And again, anybody with those last degrees of the cardinal signs, we're being throttled at this point. So I have my my ascendant descendant axis is at 29 Cancer, Capricorn. And so this, of course, is also in this longer story, involved in the longer story of Pluto squaring the nodes. And that happened to be the exact square that day that Venus and Chiron stationed retrograde. So it looks like there is something quite significant here, part of the theme of Chiron, of our healing, of who we think we are. Are we as bad as we think we are? Are we as, bad as everyone said we were, or that we believed they said that we were? Are we undermining our own well-being? Are we able to express ourselves in a plain and simple way, as Aries is so good at doing? Or are we holding ourselves back? What is the thing that we're doing ourselves that is actually blocking ourselves in the Aries part of our life? And then keeping in mind that, because that's where the North Node is as well, that's squaring that Pluto. And then keeping in mind that Venus is ruling the South Node, we pull in this energy. She's sextiling the South Node, and we're pulling in this energy of relationships in every direction in this chart. So it was, for me, not just a Venus retrograde moment, but a really heavy message, a heavy meaning with gravitas, not necessarily a negative one, but a deep, powerful message of what is going on in our relationships, what needs to be healed. That's the Chiron keyword as well. What needs to be transformed. That's the Pluto word. And how do we bring some more conscious awareness to that? And that would be the moon in sextile to the sun, and the sun in trine with Neptune, and the moon in opposition to Neptune. So all of this pulling in together a very big story about what we need to keep in our awareness. Now, a lot of people made a big deal about this yod, the finger of God energy. I find those things maybe less compelling than other people do, but nonetheless, it's worth pointing out this Venus is in yod. It's not exact. I would be a lot more compelled to get excited about it if there weren't a 2-degree difference there with the Neptune, but still worth referencing. It's not that it's not meaningful, it's just that it's not really exceptional. And especially because the yod is involving slow-moving planets, Pluto and Neptune, that are actually in sextile for like the better part of everyone's lifetime, for decades already. So this is not exceptional. So again, I don't really get too excited about that. It's in the kind of Mercury retrograde category. It's an interesting extra detail, not something to write home about. Let me just check it again before I carry on here. I'm rambling a bit, and I apologize because I'm a little bit kind of under the weather still, but here we are. I think I'll jump in, and I'm going to go sign by sign. And when I do the sign by sign forecast, then keep in mind that it's more, let's call it obvious, when it's your rising sign, so your ascendant sign. It will certainly have an impact when it's your sun and your moon. And if you are somebody who has a stellium, then it can be interesting as well. An stellium should involve more personal planets than outer planets. If you have a stellium of, I don't know, like Neptune, Jupiter, and Pluto, that's not really a stellium in my books. You have to have the personal planets in there as well, and ideally 4 planets, 3 or more. 3 is a kind of strict minimum. Right. And where are we? Okay, so let's go. We're going to go to Aries first. Here we are. And so Aries, obviously you have Chiron in your first house. You've had that there since May of 2018, the very first time. It settled in later in 2019, but you will have had this experience already for some time. But Chiron in your first house is really showing you where you might be undermining yourself through lack of self-esteem, or a belief around your early education, early childhood, early upbringing, early family connections that may be holding you back causing some self-doubt. And so this is something that you can reflect on if anything came up between sort of early April of this year and now. This would be worth reflecting on. Was there something that triggered any old unconscious kind of needs for I don't know, for a kind of a boost of ego or boost of morale, and can you do that for yourself and stop waiting for others to tell you that you're good enough, even if that was not your childhood experience. Then moving on from that will be very healing. Also, we have, of course, Venus retrograde in your 5th house, and that is the house of self-expression. And very powerful at this moment that Venus is in a trine to the North Node, which is in your 1st house. So there's a lot here that is new for Aries. That's very vibrant in terms of a fresh cycle that's beginning, and probably you're going to feel that impact even more powerfully when Venus comes back through this point one last time direct to trine that North Node. Which will be in late September, because by that time the node will have shifted degree, and or even mid to late September. And so there's a lot here about self-expression, about expressing your desire nature with Venus, showing up perhaps in relationships, love relationships in a new way, or something that you need to analyze or assess in relationships for you. 5th house is your children as well. It's also hobbies and sports and what you do to keep you amused. 5th house is also considered a domain of the mind. So the 3rd house is your thinking. The 5th house is also about the mind, and particularly mind in the sense of what you already know in terms of even past life awareness, and gives you certain mental let's call it nuance or understanding. And as Venus is there with Mercury, this can be a really interesting time that you might start to find yourself becoming very creative or having some new inspiration. Perhaps it's new old inspirations, maybe it's new layers of inspiration based on what happened in previous Venus in Leo retrogrades. And so this is a really, I think, a great opportunity for Aries. It's all very harmonious energy for you. And also keep in mind that Venus rules your money house, the 2nd house, and she rules your relationship house. So the theme of relationship for Aries is really huge. Of course, Venus is in a sextile to that South Node at the time she goes retrograde. And Jupiter is in your house of money, along with Uranus. So Uranus has been in the money house about the same length of time that Chiron has been in your 1st house. And so your income might have been a little bit unstable, or even your sense of self-worth, your sense of what the heck is going on may have been up and down quite some of that time. Because Uranus can be very disruptive in terms of what you find stabilizes you or supports you. And of course, Uranus is all about disrupting, and that's not very supportive. And so you do have this this energy of Venus from the 5th being pulled into your money house. So maybe creative ideas are actually going to benefit you in terms of money making or income or even investment. The 2nd house is also investment. And then with the relationship aspect, of course, then maybe it's about love and how you show up in love, or it can be about business relationships. If you're an entrepreneur or if you're working in any way around business, the 7th house is also a business house. That's where the business relationships, partnerships, clients show up there as well. And so this can be a big part of this Venus retrograde for you, where you're really reflecting on how your relationships are affecting your income or your money, your resources. Maybe it's like, who do you need to hit up to get some money? Or who do you want to work with to get some money? Or who do you need to stop working with or stop relating to equally? So all of that will be reflected if you go back in time, especially 8 years at a time, and see what those older cycles were showing you. and see what this Venus in the fifth house is showing you now. If this is about your children, of course, that can also bring up issues of money and of course relationship too. But the seventh house tends to not be relationships with your children. That tends to be more found in that fifth house area. So there might be something that your children are going through, especially if you've got older children. They might be having some issues around relationships themselves, or because of their relationships, then your relationship with your children might be changing. So there you have it, Aries, and good luck with all of that. I think you're blessed during this particular retrograde. So Taurus, Venus, of course, is your ruler. And you have Venus in your fourth house of home and family. What makes you happy? Venus is retrograding through that part of your chart that is reflecting also potential property and housing and what you might need to feel secure in general. And so this is also a lifetime concern for Taurus, that issues around security are always very important for Taurians. And so Venus is pulling that fourth house energy of reflection on what do I need, or what's going on at home, or what is happening around property or things that I have relied on in the past, and pulling that into your first house. And so that's going to have an impact on what is going on with you, Taurus. Of course, you have this Jupiter in your first house, so that tends to be very positive. Of course, individual charts will perhaps have their own challenges, but by and large, it's a very positive thing to have Jupiter in the first house. And it's a nice change from the disruption of having Uranus go through the first house, which has been no doubt quite a bumpy ride for the past sort of 5 years. And so that Venus is not only helping you in your first house of yourself, and maybe just making yourself feel good right now, or revising ideas around what it is that you need to feel good, to feel happy, but she's also pulling in some positive energy in your sixth house of health and your everyday activities. And again, this will depend on your natal chart, whether you are showing any kind of health issues or not. But Venus affecting that house of health, especially with Jupiter in the first house, that can bring you some really good robust health or some positivity around that. And if it's not about health, but rather about contracts or colleagues or employees, which is also the sixth house, or even pets for that matter, then that's also very positive, because now you have Venus going through this the fourth house, and you're perhaps having to reconsider these issues, whatever the issues are for you, that are really important in terms of how your everyday is structured. Of course, that still reflects on relationships of all kinds. And with the Chiron in the 12th house, you might be aware of some issues that are unconscious, especially now that the North Node has moved out of your first house and into your 12th. And so you might be more aware of unconscious patterns. That might also be where you might have experiences of dreams or just awakened dreams or sleeping dreams, where you, like daydreams, meaning where you just realize something, and it might be a realization around how you are yourself undermining yourself, and perhaps even being your own worst enemy, because Chiron, which can represent self-sabotage, is in your house of self-undoing. And so that's worth noticing at this time, because that North Node will bring a year and a half more of intensity in that part of your chart, while Chiron is still there for another 2 years, pretty much. And so the South Node, of course, is in the sixth house. So there might be a need to change habits and change the way you work, change your relationship to conflicts or difficulties, or let go of certain day-to-day problems that you might have had, or day-to-day health habits, in order to get the benefits here that will bring you to a better understanding of what you need. That can be a deeply healing process. 12th house is also ancestors, and so is the fourth house. So because Venus is going back and forth through your fourth house, this might have something to do with ancestral healing or healing of, family members that have passed. So whether or not you knew them in person, that can still be very active in your life. So that might be something that's coming up for you in the next few weeks that Venus is retrograding, and bring you a deeper understanding then by September, October. So good luck with that, Taurus, and I'll see you in the next video. So Gemini, you have Venus retrograding in your third house of communication, and that is very Gemini anyway. So it looks like there can be some need to revise something that is to do with how you connect with people financially or verbally, or using technology, or even in your own neighborhoods. This can also be about siblings and cousins and good friends that you see frequently. So that third house is a busy place, and Venus retrograde might be having you reassess your day-to-day activities. And is it too much? Are you piling on too much, and does that need to change? Certainly at this time with Venus alongside your ruler Mercury, this will be anyway an area of life that had caused you to reflect quite deeply on that part of the chart. Now, of course, as we move into August, Mercury is in your fourth house, and so that pulls in a lot of energy along with Mars in your fourth house, and that Mercury in the fourth house remains there until October. So this is just it's a kind of a starting point, and you reflect on that, but then the energy is going to take you back into your fourth house of home and family and what makes you feel secure. Venus rules your fifth house of children and pleasure and good fun and taking risks and so on. And so that's also already a place of rethinking things, because the South Node has just shifted into that fifth house. And so there is something that's changing there. Maybe that's with regards to your actual children, or with the idea of children in general, or it can be, of course, with regards to love in general, or a love affair, or rekindling love in a relationship. You've got Pluto back in your house of intimacy, the eighth house. So that might be something to do with that. Maybe it's an opportunity for you to realize, what you need to communicate, Venus in the third, to the people that you love, or that person that you love. You're Gemini after all, so it's probably a bunch of people. And so you might need to have some conversations around your intimate life, around what it is that you need, what you're realizing about that, and perhaps even letting somebody go, or some way of being in relationship, let it go, with the South Node in the fifth. You can see my video on the nodal axis, between the Aries Libra nodal axis. You'll get some more ideas there too. And of course, you've got the Venus rules your 12th house as well, which is where you've got Jupiter, and Uranus has been there for 5 years already. Jupiter will be there for a whole year, from May to May. And so Venus is also pulling in some information that is coming from perhaps hidden sources, or from inspiration from other people who might be far away, for example, or long distance travel. So Venus is in the house of travel, and short distance, usually practical, pragmatic travel. But it might be also inspiring you in some way from long distance travel, or people from different places, faraway places. This can be also to do with research. If you're a student or a researcher, or the work that you do requires some kind of writing or communicating, Venus in the third, and bringing that energy into the 12th house of research, and just kind of getting your head down and doing the work behind the scenes, that can really be very, very constructive. And Pluto is in your eighth house, which is another part of that kind of hidden energy of research and understanding. And when Pluto goes into the ninth, and with that trigger here now with Venus going back, maybe over the dotting the I's and crossing the T's. If you're editing something, then you can pull it out when Pluto goes in the ninth in 2024. and take advantage of this energy. Then when Jupiter goes into the first house in May 2024, you bring your work out to the public. So this could be a very good time if you are writing. Many Geminis do write and write very well, or communicating via a website, for example. All of that is possible. You also have Chiron in the 11th house, along with the North Node now. And so Chiron in the 11th has been a 5-year-long quest already, 4.5 or so at least, where you've been reflecting on your future goals, and also on the bonds that you share, getting there, friends and so on, groups and associations, where you find maybe you've needed to reconsider your goals, or maybe you've been kind of lowballing it and not really giving yourself the credit that you deserve. And now maybe you need to reassess your goals. And with the North Node going through there, that will be a lot easier. And so you might find that with Venus retrograde now, you have an opportunity, because the third house is also goals. It's short-term goals, and it's your willpower. And with Chiron in the 11th, it's kind of like saying, well, maybe what if I dare? What if I'm not that bad? Or what if I'm not that, I don't know, stupid or incompetent as I used to believe I was? And now I could really just try, or, just try and be fit into a group that actually suits me better. Maybe you've been trying to fit into the wrong group, and now you're realizing. And again, with Venus in the third, this will give you some much better insight, and this will shift your situation between now and September, October. So good luck with that, Gemini, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. So Cancer, Venus is in your second house of money. And this is, of course, going to have you preoccupied, very occupied with issues around income and money. What is important to you? It's all of the stuff that supports you in life. And so that is always at this time of year a kind of a consideration, because this is the time of the year that's the sun moves into your second house. So that always applies to a certain point. But when it's Venus retrograding there, often we can question our choices. I say we because I have Cancer rising. And so we can question our choices around how we work, how we earn money. What do we believe about money? This is important, to have a sense of what your values are, but not only that, but what's your money talk? What do you say to yourself about money? And so with Venus going retrograde in the second house, this can also have you reflecting on what you need for support, or where are you getting your support? That can be, again, the financial issue, but it can also be around family, because the second house also represents family. It represents everything that supports you in terms of your health as well. That means your diet and food and your physical body. So this, it should be actually quite good from that point of view, because it's Venus after all, and the sun is very good for solid health. And so this is an interesting time to reflect on a business plan, or a financial strategy, or recognizing where you might need to be changing your notions around investments, or what you're doing with your money. Evaluating expenses. You might find if Venus goes retrograde, then you're kind of like, oh, wow, I shouldn't have bought that thing. That can happen when Venus is going through the retrograde through the money houses. So be careful. Jupiter is kind of living high off the hog in the 11th house as well, which is also a money house. So money might be coming in, maybe lots of opportunities and lots of enthusiasm, but do care, take care. The Venus in the Venus in the second house can have you spending as much as you earn. And so I would slow it down, just not only from an astrological point of view, but also from a purely globally informed pragmatic point of view. This would be a good time to have a pile of something stuffed under your mattress, and just to have a sense that I have this thing that I could use at any time, because Venus, pile of money or resource, a person or family or whatever that you can hit up when you need them, because Venus rules your fourth house of what you need to feel secure. And so for Cancers, money and relationships are what bring them security, knowing that they have something, property, a house, a relationship, some kind of valuables in the fourth house. This is the energy that gives this security consciousness to Cancer risings, and through the derived houses, then Cancer, Sun, and Moon as well. And so you also have Venus ruling that 11th house, which is also where Jupiter is, and Uranus as well. So there's been a lot of change and expansion around your goals. And perhaps you're also reflecting on that, because Venus in the second house is maybe having you see more practically what needs to be done around your money, where these new opportunities are coming in with Jupiter in the 11th house. And that can be also helpful friends and associates, or people in high places that can come in and be very helpful, and bring you new opportunities. Let yourself strategize a little bit and plan. Allow some time to really understand what it is that you want to do. Don't feel like you have to have this all figured out, because September is just around the corner, and by the time that Venus goes direct again, you're going to have a much clearer sense of what it is that you need to do based on what has been happening already over the last few weeks. Also, finally, we've got Chiron in the 10th house, and that has been since May of 2018. And so there may have been moments where you feel, especially if you have your midheaven in the 10th, but it's anyway regarding career, because I use the whole sign houses, so the midheaven floats around. It's not always in the 10th house, but you may have moments of doubt or worry about inadequacy, imposter syndrome, or whatever, with Chiron in the 10th. And also with Chiron being that representation of healing, then your process of understanding yourself and your need to show up in a different way, or perhaps you're a better ally to yourself in what you do in your career, but also perhaps socially as well, that can also be very healing. And then the healing energy of Chiron actually starts to filter into what you do, or it is, if it is already what you do, then it's even more magnified in what you do with Chiron then going through that 10th house. And the North Node is there in the 10th house alongside Chiron now. So you do have quite a lot of new energy building up over the next 18 months in the 10th house. 18 months from now, then you're going to have Venus retrograding in Pisces at the end of Pisces. That will be the following pattern, the following period of retrograde. So good luck with all that, Cancer. I think it's looking pretty good. It's almost like compensating for Pluto being back in your 7th house. I'll see you in the next video. So Leo, of course, this is you. This is Venus in your 1st house. You've been lucky enough to have Venus there since the 5th of June. And Venus is going to be in your 1st house until the 8th of October. And the retrograde cycle is an opportunity for you to reflect on you yourself. Of course, that it revolves around how you show up in relationships, but also it's very much you physically. And maybe you're looking at your physical body or your appearance and deciding that you want something different. Maybe you're having a sense that you want something different out of your work, because of course Venus also rules your house of career. And so there's something that you can reflect on. Maybe there's something that Jupiter is helping you in that 10th house expand into a sense of optimism that you're able to develop. So using this time while Venus is retrograde going through the 1st house, you can reflect on how you want to show up, especially once Venus goes direct in September, after the 4th of September, and really make an impact there. Now, Jupiter is going to be stationing retrograde the day that Venus stations direct. So this pulls in a lot of energy between you and your career. So I'd be getting serious about whatever that is. If it's not career, if you're beyond that now, or if you're independently wealthy and you don't need any of these career things, then that can be your social status, your marital status, how you show up in society. So either way, you're bringing something of yourself there in your house of career through that Venus passage. And you can make the most of that opportunity while Venus is moving back and forth between your in your first house. And then, of course, Venus rules your third as well. And so that's your communication. And Venus is going to be supporting all issues around communication and exchanges of all kinds, whether that be vocal, verbal, emails, communications through your website if you have one, or internet and all kinds of social media. And of course, it's siblings and cousins and your neighbors and people like that. And of course, the third house is also your plans. And so maybe this issue around your career or what it is that you want to do, how it is that you're feeling about yourself, how you're perceiving yourself now, how you like to show up in the future. This is all coming back into what it is that I need to change in terms of my goals, or what am I letting go of in terms of how I've been communicating with people, or how I've been connecting with people on an everyday level. Because that, of course, the North Node and Chiron are in your ninth house. So what is my purpose? What is the future holding for me? Something big, something different, for sure. It's not the run of the mill. When the North Node goes through the ninth house, there's something new coming in. Do look at the video I did on the nodal axis and the Aries Libra nodal axis, because it'll give you some more information there. But definitely, this is a wonderful energy for Leo, not only because it's in your house, which it is every 8 years, but also because it's just pulling in so much goodness when Jupiter is also in your house of career. So a great opportunity while Venus is really in this beautiful communication with Jupiter, pulling in something quite special for your future and your sense of purpose. So make the most of that, Leo. That's a really great opportunity. And you've got Pluto as well in your sixth house just for the next few months, where there might be one last little thing about what you do every day, how you work, what the kind of job is. And it's like, yeah, we're done with that, moving on. So good luck with all that. If it's a health issue, it looks good, by the way. So again, that depends on your chart, but you can, with Venus in the first house, often things go quite well. So go for it, Leo, and I'll see you in the next video. And Virgo, you've got Venus in your 12th house, and that can be the house of self-undoing. So be on your best behavior. You've got Mercury there at the same time. So Mercury, by the time you will be hearing this, Mercury is in your first house, your ruler in your first house. So that's quite nice too. A very strong Mercury. But do keep in mind that when Venus is going through the 12th, and especially as Venus retrogrades, that there may be issues that we need to deal with that are of an unconscious nature, or an issue around integrity that is in relationship, for example. This can also be something to do with foreigners, foreign lands, because the 12th house is all those faraway things that we don't see in front of our eyes. It's either behind the eyes or it's behind our back, one way or another in the 12th house. And so there can be something that you learn about yourself while Venus is going retrograde in the 12th. And that can be really, really useful to you. Venus rules your second house of self-worth. And so you might be discovering something about yourself that actually increases your self-worth, makes you feel better about yourself. It's certainly going to help that your ruler, Mercury, is going to be in your first house for pretty much all of August and through October even, and through the whole time that Venus is in your 12th, because Mercury is retrograding there in your first house. So a really interesting time for you to consider your sense of self-worth, your values, issues around money. Of course, the Venus in the 12th can represent loss of money. And so that will depend on your natal chart, but just be careful how you spend your money, and be careful who you share money with. And especially because you've got Chiron in the 8th house, that is something to pay attention to anyway. You've got the North Node in the 8th house, and so there's something new coming into shared resources as well with regards to this Venus ruled second house of income and so on. So there's something here that might be needing I don't know, some revision of some kind. So the The south node is that you're letting go of something. You're letting go of a way of being in your house of income. That doesn't mean you're letting go of income. It means that you're letting go of how that might have shown up for you in the past. And therefore, that can just as well mean that you're having to get a new source of income. And that you could. It's not that you wouldn't, but it doesn't mean that you're necessarily just losing money, for example. But this can also represent issues around family. And the second house does represent family. The Chiron in the 8th house is around intimacy as well. And the 12th house also is about bed pleasures. And so Venus in the 12th house can also reflect some aspect of that. That's why I said earlier, be careful acting with the utmost integrity, because that can get us into a bit of trouble if Venus is in the 12th house and things are not entirely above board. And so Venus also rules your 9th house of higher education and your future and your sense of what you believe and what you find, what you think of as the foundation of meaning in your life, what your purpose is. And so this Venus retrograde can also bring a lot of insight, because it's coming from the 12th house, and understanding around what you really want in your life. That's where she's pulling in the values and your self-worth, and then pulling in this deeper unconscious process, and then pulling in also this 9th house sense of what am I here for? It looks good, I have to say, Virgo. And so that is definitely something that you can use constructively to bring out the best of this Venus retrograde cycle. And so making sure that you're going through that healing, that deep healing of Chiron in the 8th, which can be issues around sexual healing, any issues around sexuality or around intimacy in general. Intimacy doesn't have to be sex. It's emotional intimacy or feeling safe and trusting of other people. With Virgo rising, you tend to pick up strays. That's how I describe it anyway. You've got that Pisces in the 7th. And so you may have already been let down at some point, especially with Neptune there in the 7th. There may have been some letdowns. And so Chiron in the house of intimacy is helping you to see that, and maybe helping you to see how you have been a part of that. Of course, we participate in everything that goes on. So it's an opportunity for you to reflect on that and heal whatever might be coming up in that area of your life. So good luck with all of that. And I'll see you in the next video, Virgo. So Libra, Venus, of course, is your ruler, and Venus is in your 11th house of your hopes and dreams, of friendships and groups and associations. And so there's quite a lot of activity, forward thinking, a sense of dynamism, perhaps in your social groups. Maybe things are changing. Maybe you're reflecting and reconsidering what it is that you actually have as life goals or dreams for the future. Again, this will be something that repeats. It's something that you'll see every 8 years or so that comes up in that part of your chart. Now, the 11th is also the money that you earn from what you do in the world, particularly so if you work for yourself, either as a consultant or an entrepreneur or something like that. And so this might also have something to do with money as well in the sense of earnings. But nonetheless, certainly with regards to your vision for yourself and your future and who should that involve, this is a big question, particularly because the North Node is in your 7th house for a year and a half from now until the beginning of 2025. And Chiron has been going through there for 5 years. And so issues around relationships have been a big source of healing, a big source of learning and overcoming perhaps patterns that have been a little bit unhelpful, let's say, for some of you. Again, that depends on your chart. And so you've got the South Node moving through your 1st house. That South Node is in a sextile to Venus, which she's ruling. And that South Node in the 1st house is suggesting that you need to show up differently in your life. There's something that's going to be very, very different, and that will cause new relationships to show up, new ways of relating to show up, new business partnerships, new business situations of all kinds, perhaps new clients, for example, And so this Venus in the 11th can really help you if you use that consciously to determine, how do I envisage my future? How do I want to see myself, down the line in the future? So Venus also rules your 8th house of other people's money, which is quite handy. And so Libra, you have this double bonus of not only Venus in the 11th house of money, your ruler ruling the house of other people's money, but you've also got Jupiter there. So I want to know what's going on in your finances. Do let me know, because it's looking pretty good. I'd say you've had some challenges over the years for sure. Recently, Libras have had some real big challenges. And so, hey, it looks like this could be a nice moment. Let's take it, huh? Take it for what it's worth, Libra. And maybe you have a spouse or a partner, business partner, life partner who is making more money, bringing more money in, or somebody that is, or some agency or association and group or something that you're able to benefit from. And milk it for all it's worth there, Libra, and use this Venus again to assess who's in my life and who's out. And that Chiron will also give you some hints, especially since April. What have I learned about relationships? What have I learned about who should be taking up that space across the table from me? So good luck with all of that, Libra. It's looking pretty good for you, actually. And I'll see you in the next video. And so Scorpio, you've got Venus ruling Venus is in your 10th house of career. That's really quite nice because she's there alongside the sun at the same time. And so your career seems to be very highlighted at this point. It can also be your social status in general, not just, of course, that's important, but your reputation or your ambitions and your maybe even your marital status for that matter, because Venus is also ruling your 7th house, and that's where Jupiter is. So there can be something around your marital status, which looks like it's gone through a bit in the last 5 years with Uranus there. But lovely to have Venus in the 10th whenever these planets are in the angular houses. You've got 2 benefics now in the angular houses. That's really pretty good. Sorry. So you do have a really nice opportunity here to grow your career, pardon me, and to maybe improve your career situation. Venus rules your 12th house. Sorry, I just need to take some water. Tail end of a cold, so it's always the loudest part. Venus is ruling your 12th, which is sometimes known as the house of self-undoing, because it's our unconscious mind, it's unconscious habits and things that we're often not aware of. It can be also hidden enemies, people we're not sure of, or people that we're not aware of are actually not working on our own behalf. And so this is worth noting, because with Venus in the 10th house, you can attract attention and cause potential for jealousy. It's worth pointing that out. That also depends on your chart. But then you might find that in that 12th house, you will have to do some housekeeping and let go of certain habits or certain ways of being with people that cause them to rather want your failure rather than your success. So just notice that. It's not going to be true for everybody, but it's worth pointing out. Even though Venus is benefic and so is Jupiter in your 7th. You have Chiron in the 5th house, and that's one of the reasons that this can also be relevant in the 6th house even, because Chiron in the 6th can show you where there might be issues around relationships that are like with colleagues or with employees. Now the dog wants to go out, she's going to have to wait. Or contracts and things that might be challenging. So challenges there with Chiron, maybe showing you here and there where where some things have undermined your happiness recently. And so take advantage of this Venus retrograde to try and understand these dynamics, the dynamics between relationships, business partnerships, and what is the effect of my ambitions and my goals on my relationships. And Is there somebody who might be trying to undermine me, or is it me that is actually undermining me in my everyday life, or even just basically through my habits and work habits? Am I a workaholic and therefore my spouse is having second thoughts, or something like that? Your family might be feeling a little bit left behind at the moment with Venus up there in the 10th. Everything comes in good time, but with Venus retrograde, you might need to be reassessing some of these things. So good luck with that, Scorpio. I do think it's more benefic than malefic, that's for sure, because you do have these angular houses full of goodness at the moment. So make the most of it, and I'll see you in the next video. Sagittarius, you've got Venus in your 9th house. That's a lovely place to have Venus, and the sun is along there with her. And at this point, the sun is very much in its joy in the 9th house. And so looks like a really nice opportunity for you. Sorry, just take some water. Sorry, it's been talking for quite a while now, over an hour. So Sagittarius, you do have some good fortune here. Venus is going to be helping you, whether that is with a sense of what it is that you want to do in your life at this moment, what your life purpose is, or whether it's something to do with plans for travel or expanding your horizons in some way. That can be intellectually as well. Venus rules your 11th house of future goals. And interestingly, while Venus is up there thinking, what am I doing? Who am I in this moment? And what do I want out of my life? What's my purpose? Then you've got the South Node in the house of your future and your hopes and dreams, and friends and so on. And so there could be quite a lot that you're reflecting on in terms of your higher purpose and how it is that you see your life in a better light, let's say, or with a higher philosophy of living. And therefore you might be feeling it's time to shed some relationships. And the South Node in the 11th is both representing shedding some, maybe future goals or ambitions or dreams, as well as letting go of associations and groups and things that might have been distracting you from what you now want. And that's a year and a half. This is not something you have to figure out entirely during this Venus retrograde, but that will help. I think it will bring you a lot of information, and it will improve the situation, I think, of this nodal axis, which is asking you to bring something in creatively through self-expression, through your own creativity. Chiron is retrograding through your 5th house of creativity. So whatever's been going on since the beginning of April, you can now reflect upon, to what extent. And that 5th house is also about love, and it's also about children, taking risks and so on. Where have you, because you've got Aries on the 5th house, Sagittarius, that's one of the reasons why you're known as a risk taker. So it's no surprise, but maybe Chiron there has shown you where, sometimes you've either doubted yourself or you've made choices that kind of backfired or worked against you. And so use this opportunity with Venus retrograding to reassess that too. How is my behavior or my potential self-indulgence, because that's the 5th house as well. Am I being too self-indulgent? Am I being too obsessed maybe with, and again, that depends on your natal chart, with having fun, for example. And do I need to revise that so that I can accomplish the things that I want for this higher vision that I have of my life? This Venus also rules your 6th house, and that's your everyday life and your health as well. Sorry, speaking of health. And so, yeah, you're lucky you've got Jupiter there in the house of health. I'm a Cancer rising. I don't have any help in the house of health. And so you have both Venus in the 9th and ruling that 6th house with Jupiter. And so you definitely have a lot of support in your everyday life in terms of how you show up and with your colleagues and with whom, maybe employees and things like that. There could be a very busy schedule right now. And that might be something that Venus retrograde can help you determine as well. Is that working for you? Is that good for you? Or is it just simply too much? Because let's face it, Jupiter can also bring us too much, even if it's a good thing. And so good luck with all of that, Sag, and I will see you in the next video. Capricorn, Venus is in your 8th house of shared resources, other people's money, intimacy. It can be inheritances and money that you receive from like tax returns, or just business, even from clients, for example, if you work in that basis. And so Venus going retrograde through there is having you reassess that, or maybe there is a condition by which you receive money that is being reassessed. This is the house of your unconscious mind as well. This is where we can find fears and difficulties in terms of our psychological challenges. And certainly you've got Chiron moving through the 4th house, which is another psychological house. And so you may find that you have been experiencing some psychological tension, some difficulties there over the years, maybe the last 5 years. Here and there, you may have had some challenges depending on how Chiron has been influencing, because it's squaring your ascendant, how it might have been influencing you. And also you've had Pluto going through the 1st. It's not been an easy time, no doubt. So Venus going through the 8th can actually bring up a lot of insight, can be very helpful for you, helping you find not only clarity on your own, but also potentially people who can help you in those areas of life. And that can be financial help, or it can be psychological help. It can be intimacy, it can be a new relationship. All these things are possible. Venus rules your 10th house, and that is your social status. So again, that can be something changing in your relationships. You have the South Node going through the 10th and the North Node going through your 4th. So a lot more of your energy is going in into what you could call, pardon me, your home, your house and home property, but also your foundation in life, your psychological foundation, what you need to feel secure and happy. And so while Venus is moving through the 8th, she can be bringing you some really interesting new insights in terms of what you need in terms of your career, maybe needing to change something with regards to career as the South Node is moving through there. And also Venus is ruling the 5th house of children. And so there can be something there that is that requires a reassessment, but it looks pretty good, to be honest, because you've got Jupiter there in the 5th. Again, it depends on the rest of your chart, but Venus can be supporting that 5th house of children. And so in your children's lives as well, there can be something quite helpful or beneficial for them or between you in terms of a relationship. 5th house is also love affairs. It's fun. It's all the things that you enjoy doing. And so with Venus in the house of intimacy and Jupiter in the house of love affairs, it's all systems go, again, depending on your chart. So there we are. It seems like a bit of a smoothing out of some rough edges that you've had lately, but you definitely have the benefit of Venus right now, and some new horizons there in terms of your house and home and what supports you. I think you'll get the answers to whatever might be brewing right now only once Venus leaves your 8th house and goes into the 9th house and gives you a sense of what's there on the horizon for you. Because Venus in the 8th, let's face it, it's still a difficult house. And so you might have new inklings and new ideas around things, but it's not necessarily going to have you feeling at peace until Venus moves on into Virgo, which will be from the 8th of October. So good luck with that, Capricorn, and I'll see you in the next video. So Aquarius, you have Venus in your house of relationship, which is pretty nice. And that is, of course, going to be very harmonizing for the person that you're relating to. It brings you a lot of loving energy, a lot of relationship energy in general. It doesn't mean everything is coming up roses. That of course, that depends on each individual's chart, but certainly it will be a lovely support. And Venus is in an angular house, which always helps. And you also have Jupiter, which Venus is ruling currently in your 4th house, of home. And so this can be a real treat to have this opportunity to reassess relationships that might be life partners or business partners, or just how you are in relationships, what you want and need in relationships, bringing a lot more harmony into the scene, but potentially only after realizing something needs to change, and that might be something that you need to deal with yourself. I don't see this as anything particularly difficult or negative, and again, that depends on you. It is worth noting that Mars is in the 8th house for you, and so there can be some tensions and conflicts in the house of relationship in terms of intimacy or marriage. So if that is the case, then use this time with Venus retrograde to go through what it is that you need, what it is the relationship needs, and are you understanding each other? And certainly we have Chiron in the 3rd house of communication, and the North Node is there now. And so maybe there is something there about not really communicating clearly, not being entirely sure perhaps of your communication or what you need and how you're expressing that. This can also have something to do with work exchanges, because Venus is in the house of work too. That's business, 7th house, business and business partnerships. 3rd house is exchanges and commerce of all kinds. So there may be something there for you as well in that more financial sense. And the North Node is pulling your attention in there for the next year and a half. And Venus is ruling the South Node in your 9th house, which suggests that there's some a vision that you had for yourself, which is changing, or at least it's becoming less important. Maybe you need to become more pragmatic, much more practical, and focused on the details at this stage, less focused on the abstract, less focused on higher philosophical concerns, and see, to what extent you might be able to let go of ideas that you had, that beliefs that you had maybe that were actually holding you back, and your beliefs themselves might be the thing that is what is needed to let go of so that your relationships can improve as well. But it looks pretty good all in all. I think it looks really helpful. It's Venus after all, so you can bring some great healing into relationships in this moment. So good luck with that, Aquarius, and I'll see you in the next video. Pisces, you have Venus in the 6th house of everyday work, your health, your routines. And so that brings you quite a lot of benefit if you've got colleagues or employees, people working for you, or even staff at home, if you're lucky enough to have people at home working for you. And so that can bring a lot of harmony, or it can have you reflecting on the relationship and maybe even reflecting on certainly your role in it, but whether the relationship is still valid. Keep in mind that Venus is actually exalted for Pisces, and so that's quite a strong Venus. Always interesting for Pisces what Venus is doing, because Venus gives Pisces really good results. Venus rules your 3rd house of communication, where you have Jupiter, and that's your siblings as well, and your everyday busyness and traveling, short-term travel, and travel with practical reasons. Venus is also ruling your 8th house of other people's money, and so perhaps in a reflection on what you're doing every day. Sorry, my dog is now nagging me to get out the door, so I'm going to have to go soon. Perhaps what it is that you're reflecting on while Venus is retrograde is your everyday habits and health, and what it is that you really want to do with your life. It can be really, really foundational things like, where do I live? The 3rd house is also your environment, your community. You've got Chiron in the 2nd house of security and income, and the things that you have that bring you a sense of security and support. And that's maybe been an issue for you, where Chiron is now retrograde, and so you can reflect back on what's been going on since the beginning of April. Have you been taking care of your money? Have you been taking care of things that you need to actually support you? The 2nd house is family as well, so there may be things to deal with in terms of the health of a family member. This is Venus in the 6th house as well. There can be something there, and again, will depend on your natal chart. It's not for everybody, but Venus going through the 6th house can be that you need to help a family member, that you're the one bringing support to a family member, and that might require some time that you're taking for their own health. And this can also be dealing with your health as well. It can be something that is having you recall or reflect on your daily habits and health in a better way, in a more harmonious way, because now you're realizing that something that you're doing is undermining your self-esteem or your well-being or your self-worth or your actual physical health, because the second house is what supports your health and you in general. North Node is there for 1.5 years, so this is going to be a big focus for you. So make the most of that. And then, of course, Venus rules your 8th house of other people's money. And so that looks like it can be very helpful. The South Node is going through that part of your chart, which means that there's an aspect of other people's money or shared resources that is no longer working, that is going to be moving on, that you might let go of that, and you're becoming much more focused on how you yourself are a resource unto yourself, that you're the one responsible for your income and your assets and so on. Kind of a grow up moment that corresponds very much to that Saturn in the 1st house. So Pisces, I wish you all the best with all of this, and I will see you in the next video.